One of my most anticipated games right now is Crimson Desert. I was already lucky enough to play it a few times, most recently at Gamescom. But now they have an IGN first going on where they're sharing new gameplay. And one of the new things they shared is the fact that you can ride a freaking raptor. And if you look at my channel name, you know why that's exciting. So let's look at this new IGN gameplay, and I will share some thoughts and stuff from my play sessions as well. I think I played in total 2.5 hours, maybe already, maybe more. 3 hours in total. So let's see. What a mech, okay.
Easy to take a quick look at Crimson Desert and assume it's another fantasy action game where you hack and slash your way through enemies with repeated presses of the attack button. And if you equip your protagonist, Cliff, with a sword, you can certainly do that. But tap 2 of your controller's face buttons together and he'll lunge, thrusting the blade directly forward. If you then press both the light and heavy attack buttons at the same time, he'll transition into a powerful, magic-infused overhead slam, bringing his sword down in an arc of dizzying particle effects.
So, the thing is with this game, first we only saw the sword and shield, but they actually have a lot of other weapon types as well, and you can like pick them up, but you can also just use them. So, in my session I had to pick them up and then I could just switch between them. It seems like you always have your sword and shield, and the other weapons are just ones you find. I am curious if you can also find a better like spear or something, or that all the heavy weapons are only the ones you can find on the ground. But they all have their own moveset. I actually discussed that a bit in one of the main videos I did. But yeah, there's a lot of depth here. And one of the things you saw as well is the element wheel. If we quickly go here. So this is new. In a previous session, they're constantly... So I've played it now at TwitchCon, which was like earlier this year. And then I played the Gamescom demo. And they already made some tweaks to how the game works in terms of how you select your powers, because there's so much in this game. If you've been paying attention, you know this, but they're still figuring out the best way to use the controller, because there are not enough buttons on the controller for all the things this game is doing. So expect a lot of these wheels where you switch, and yeah, this is of course an element that you can use that has different powers. So let's continue with the video.
Everything in your combat arsenal. Transition from aiming a bow into a dodge roll, and you'll trigger a brief window of medieval Matrix slow motion, perfect for scoring a headshot. Cast a spell at the apex of a jump, and you'll launch yourself into the air, riding the energy of the magic's blast. And, in perhaps the most entertaining example, hold 2 face buttons in conjunction with shifting the direction of the left analog stick to unleash a variety of increasingly amusing wrestling moves, from simple grapples to human hammer throws.
Yeah, so you do them with, I think, triangle and circle. If you press those buttons, you like grab an enemy or can like drop them on the floor. It's pretty crazy, but again, there's so much to learn, and you clearly know that the person that's playing here has played a lot before, because trust me, the moment you pick up the controller, and that's why a lot of the gameplay from people that are trying the game out for the first time doesn't look that great, is because there are a lot of controls to learn. There are a lot of enemies coming at you. It really has a steep learning curve, it seems, but once you get the hang of it, there's gonna be a lot, and it's gonna really create a lot of cool, oh my god, I didn't know that was possible moments.
For this month's IGN First, we spoke to the design team at Crimson Desert developer Pearl Abyss to learn how they crafted this deep, multi-layered combat system. The very first thing they said was both surprising and helped contextualize everything. One of the key inspirations for Crimson Desert's combat was retro arcade games like Samurai Showdown, Final Fight, and King of Fighters. Suddenly, all those multi-button combos and link moves make much more sense. But those fighting game combos are not necessarily the thing that Pearl Abyss intended to replicate. The team cites the strong sense of impact that comes with each blow, both inflicted and received, as a key aspect they wanted to capture. That's clear not just in the visuals, but in the crunchy audio.
And another thing, why it's so yeah, they looked at these arcade games. Another thing you really notice when in these battles, and it took me out of the experience a bit, but these enemies are taunting you as well, and they're constantly saying, "Oh, I thought you were better than this," as if you are in a wrestling ring, instead of like like fighting on the battlefield till the death. So there are some weird elements like that as well. But now that I hear that they took inspiration from those games, it makes more sense. But yeah, overall, if you were still worried that this was gonna be a Souls-like, no, it's not. It's an action game through and through.
The sound design team directly references Capcom as an inspiration, but across the 10 different boss battles I've fought so far, plus plenty more skirmishes in the open world, it's clear that there's more to it than that. Fighting game characters have access to many different moves that can be chained together to create unique approaches and strategies. Open world games, on the other hand, typically have a much more restrained moveset, a dodge, an attack, and a counter, for instance. But despite being a fantasy open world game itself, Crimson Desert's long list of combat moves seems to be gunning for the breadth of options that fighting games thrive on. Cliff.
Yeah, so one thing you saw here is you can like summon an artillery blast on an enemy.
Crimson Desert's long list.
So there are like, you just say, oh, there I want a sort of meteor strike of arrows on an enemy. So you can really chain those moves together. It's going to be a lot of fun.
The ability tree means there's a multitude of ways to approach any fight. It's not just ranged versus melee, but the more minute choices within those options.
But like, and you already see it here. That I think that is gonna, and I'm not sure how they're gonna change that, but I hope there are some settings. But look at the particle effects that are going on a battlefield with many characters. It's like electricity. Oh, and now we have this enemy. We have a fire attack. Like there's so many. It's hard to read the enemy basically. Even in 1v1 fights, because all these attacks are so glowing and there's like particles everywhere, so it's kind of hard to. I think the game might be going a bit too crazy in those scenarios.
Sword fight, channel lightning down your blade. Use whistling arrows to summon artillery strikes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an arrow you shoot and then boom, boom, boom. So that's a very cool combo.
The important takeaway here
okay, this is the first time we're seeing the mechs actually as enemies.
Is that Pearl Abyss refuses to provide any real strict definition for Crimson Desert's combat system. Unlike something like Batman Arkham, there's no rhythm or pattern to follow. The combat team told me that they had no interest in creating a game where you have to respond to on-screen prompts by pressing specific buttons, the kind of system we've seen in games like Mad Max, Shadow of Mordor, and both Marvel's Avengers and Spider-Man games. Instead, the studio aims to fulfill a player's fantasies by allowing them to do whatever they want in any situation. That arguably makes Crimson Desert's approach to battle a bit loose, and for some, the distinct lack of rules or rhythm may be frustrating. There are no hard counters for particular enemies, for instance, nor any kind of strict rock-paper-scissors relationships between different attack or defense types. A particular weapon may be stronger against shielded enemies, for instance, but there's no requirement for you to use it. The same applies to bosses. While they certainly have attack patterns that can be memorized and weaknesses that can be exploited, Pearl Abyss has no interest in demanding you pay attention to that. The team believes that any method of attack should be valid. Well, within reason. You can't swing a 500-pound monster by its ankles, of course.
Yeah, that is interesting that they say that, because the first play session, so at TwitchCon, what I played was basically the boss fights, and you did see that, okay, some attacks that you probably learn around that point in the game were were stronger against that enemy, but then later those moves did not work against that, like a different boss you fight later on. So there are totally some attacks in my experience that work better, but you really have to figure those out. And look, I think this game is gonna be, it can be frustrating in the sense that there's not a right way to play, but I do think it can create really fun conversations where it's like, how did you beat this boss? Yeah, I did this and this. Whoa, are you able to do that? So it creates a lot of freedom, but it also, and I think that's what, like two sides to the coin. On one hand, it's super ambitious. They're trying so many things, but there are also way more things that can go wrong. And I think that will be very fascinating with how this game shakes out if they can find the right balance.
This, there if you want it, but no worries if you don't approach, extends out into the world itself. The black space engine that powers Crimson Desert is able to simulate elemental reactions.
Black space.
So water can either freeze or conduct electricity when struck by the correct spell, while wood will burn and smolder when set alight. The combat team cites the modern Legend of Zelda games as inspiration for this, in which there's constant interaction between you and the environment. But this is very much a system that you can master and exploit if you choose to, rather than a core component of combat. For instance, there won't be a boss battle where you have to freeze water to hold your foe in place, or coax them into a metal grid you can then electrify with a lightning spell. Cliff is not a wizard, and so his spells come courtesy of a bracelet that grants him simple mastery over fire, ice and lightning. But new weapons and gear help expand his ability set further than the unlocks available on your skill tree. There's a spear, for instance, which opens up like a propeller and blasts enemies with bursts of wind like a deadly airzuka, and a sword that summons an angry genie-like creature.
Awesome. And you likely get that from the boss. Yeah, they really seem to give you... So, for example, one of the early bosses they showed was the Stag Lord, and defeating that boss gives you the sword and the shield from that enemy. So, I love that always when, yeah, fighting a boss gives you one of their powers or their gear. And yeah, now that we see the genie attack, that's obviously the reward from the boss we just killed.
The wilder these options become. Cliff is able to ride a number of mounts, which in the early hours are simple horses with no remarkable talents. But head into the territory held by the Black Bears faction, and you'll be able to saddle up on a which can swipe at foes with sharpened claws.
Oh my god, it has attacks.
Effectively thinning out herds of barbarians. Fast forward a few hours.
Look at that shield, by the way. Shield looks awesome.
And things become stranger still. Your simple horse could be traded for a raptor. Yes,
yeah,
on the back of a literal dinosaur.
Woo!
If you prefer your scaly mounts to fly and breathe fire, then Crimson Desert also has that covered too. Fantasy's most important creature is present and correct here, and in the game's later hours you'll be able to command Tristar the Dragon, who will swoop in at your beck and call.
What
but that's
the heck?
not the wildest option. Dispelling any notion that this is a typical high fantasy video game, in Crimson Desert, you can pilot a mech. Yes, really. The Dwarven Engineered Battle Robot is a late-game treat that asks the question, what if a Bioshock Big Daddy and a Titanfall mech had a baby?
That is crazy.
Thrusters, machine guns, multi-target lock homing rockets, and a wide-radius EMP blast, your sword and board-wielding enemies don't stand a chance.
That is crazy, but... And I feel that for this game, it's like, yeah, sure, if you want to use that, you will steamroll all the content. But yeah, you will make it less fun for yourself. But late game unlock is nice. It will be sick, though, to get this ASAP.
Sword and board-wielding enemies don't stand a chance. Fire-breathing dragons and machine gun toting mechs could absolutely destroy Crimson.
Look at the draw distance, by the way. The world feels huge. And I said it in my 2026 video as well, for if you have not watched it yet, or if you're watching live here. This game, it comes out March 19th. And it launches close to other big games. But you're gonna be lost in this game till GTA 6, if GTA still comes out at the end of May. Like, there's gonna be so much content in this game. Look at the scope here. So this is probably the desert land where we saw the raptor. Like a huge city there. Really, really impressive. And we, of course, also have stuff in the sky as well.
Destroy Crimson Desert's balance, but they've been carefully plotted on the campaign's overall power curve. Pearl Abyss's combat team explained that such mounts are not designed to be simple tools that you can use whenever you want, and so all of the robot's destructive devices drain a limited fuel gauge, which, when depleted, will put the machine out of action. This means you can't just use this modern marvel of technology in perpetuity. You'll be able to stroll up to a boss battle and decimate a knight with your stock of missiles. But when you are in the pilot's chair, there's no denying that things become more of a massacre than an even matchup.
I get it. It's nice, but I hope there's like a way to refuel the machine. Otherwise, I'm like, what is the right time to use this? Because I don't want to like waste it. So this like camp, I can probably take that on without the machine. So you want to maybe save it for a larger boss or something.
Pearl Abyss is happy with this power spike though. The team considers it something of a present or a reward for players who have progressed so far into the game. As you can see, there is a wide range of combat options to say the least, and that brings us back to the fighting game comparison. Something like Street Fighter is arguably the inverse of Dark Souls, as in a From Software game, the true challenge is learning everything about your enemy and then attempting to exploit that, whereas in a fighting game, the challenge is to learn everything about your character and master their moveset. Pearl Abyss subscribes to the Street Fighter approach, and explains that the goal is for Crimson Desert's difficulty to become increasingly more manageable the more you master Cliff's abilities. That's easier said than done though. Like a fighting game, there's the sense that every one of Cliff's actions has an alternate version if you combine it with the right skill. This naturally creates depth, but also complexity. Dive in without any instruction, and it can feel quite overwhelming.
Oh yeah, like I said, it is super overwhelming.
In an attempt to keep things as simple as possible, Polar Abyss has put a lot of focus on what each button does. The idea is that there's consistency in every action. If you want to introduce an element into an action, you build on your existing knowledge of the controller. Clicking the thumbsticks, for instance, fires magic spells from your palms. Click the left stick to use your left palm, click the right stick to use your right palm. And so to do a triple jump, which is powered by your magic spells, you string together an L3, R3, L3 combo, rather than tap the jump button 3 times.
Again, that's hard with press events and stuff. You get half an hour or an hour to play, and then you see a sort of like detailed controller explanation in front of you, and in this game it's huge. So like, what the heck? And you don't want to like spend 15 minutes of the 30 minutes you have, or of the hour, reading that piece of paper and trying the different moves. But I really hope that, and that's gonna be super important in this game, that you start out super, super easy, basic, and then you build out these combos at a good pace, so that the moment you master one of these palm attacks or whatever, you move on to the next thing, instead of them throwing everything at you. So it will be very, very important. But yeah, I do think what a lot of open world games have these days is that they, at one point, you hit the ceiling and you kind of figured out a cool way to play, and then all the content is kind of not that hard anymore. And I do think that this game will have a ceiling that is so high that even by the end of the game, you will see people do things that you're like, what the heck, I did not even know that was possible.
At first glance, Crimson Desert certainly looks like many other open world games, and that's not an unfair comparison. As we'll explore later in this month's IGN First, there are plenty of genre staples here, from puzzle dungeons to faction quests to bounties posted on the town bulletin boards. In totality, this is not an unusual game, but zoom in on the combat and you'll find quite an unusual beast. It's built atop the classic staples. There's still dodges and parries and regular attacks, but never before have I played a medieval fantasy game where I can chain Spider-Man's swing into Batman's glide, into a ground pound that's delivered like Sonic the Hedgehog doing his best Hulk impression. In short, it's safe to say that Crimson Desert
The bear, man. So awesome.
For more from Crimson Desert, check out our exclusive gameplay video.
Yeah, we're gonna do that another time, but wow. That looks awesome. You clearly saw that they only had some B-roll from the developers, so they were not able to share everything they were talking about. But the mounts in particular sound awesome. Having the bear and being able to fight with it, like, that's crazy. That's what I want. Yes, please. So yeah, for more Crimson Desert, of course, subscribe. Also check out the main channel video that you see right here with my impressions after playing. And yeah, I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.